மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
But it actually creates an interesting tactical possibility for black after bishop to g5. And the whole point here is that white is again having to deal with the threat of knight takes f2 or knight takes g3, or probably the simplest here is bishop takes e3 and then knight f2. So all of these tactics are in the air. And the whole point here is that if white captures on g5 here, let's say knight takes g5, then after h takes g5, we imbalance the structure in quite a favorable way. First of all, this rook in h8 gets immediately active and we get a good target on h5. And second of all, now we're building up this quite nice pawn phalanx here, and it's possible to play g4 at an opportune moment, which would put all these pawns in this nice light square formation and completely entrench this knight on e4. So black is actually starting to really take over the initiative here. So I would like to share with you one game that I had in this line that I actually had a couple months ago. This was in early 2017 against a 2300, and my opponent, after f5, he did not know this position, and he played the move knight to d2. In the appendix, I will actually attach two more games that I've played in this variation, and one including king c2, and also including the move knight to e5, both of which were quite interesting games. But again, not to overburden you with information here, this will be added in like sort of the bonus chapters I've already mentioned in the introduction. So instead, my opponent played knight d2, and when I checked the base, I also realized this was the most popular option for white in this position, just getting rid of this active knight. I didn't really have a choice, so I went knight takes d2, bishop d2, bishop f6, bishop c3, and now king f7. And actually, when I had this position, I was actually quite optimistic about my chances. It looks very dry. It's an endgame. Endgames can be known as quite boring, but did not feel like this was the case at all here. Despite the simplified material, white actually has a clear target here. This pawn on d4 is sort of not that easy for white to protect. Of course, it's very simple for him to protect it with his rooks and bishops, but he can't protect it with the pawn, which means that all his pieces are about to be passive, and I'm just going to gang up on it, and while his pieces are distracted, with the defense of the pawn, I can sort of engage in another endeavor. Meanwhile, I do have this backwards pawn on e6, but the king is easily covering it, and like I said, objectively the position here is around equal, but I would actually take black here, and I would like to just show you how this game went on. Rook e1, rook d8, rook e2, so potentially white is planning to maybe double, or maybe double on the e-file or d-file. Played rook d7, king c2, rook d8, and rook d2. So this was part one of my plan. As I mentioned, I want to tie down all his pieces to the defense of this d4 pawn. And now I decided to just probe a little bit, wait, and improve my position by playing b6. And the idea here is, again, a slight pawn move. Maybe I'm planning c5. I'm also maybe stopping bishop a5 ideas. And generally, I just want to see what he's up to here, what he's going to do. So he plays a4, gaining some space. And now I play the quiet a6. So in case he goes a5, I'll have the possibility of playing b5, which, as we know, is a typical Caro idea to gain some light squares. Now he plays b3. And I realized, okay, I've improved my position a little bit. I've tried to see what he's going to do. Seems like he's pretty solid. And now I found an idea to make progress by playing g6. Again, after king takes, I've given myself an isolated pawn. But on the other hand, I gave myself the g-file and another possibility, which I will keep a secret for now, but we will see it played in the game. So my opponent played the move rook d3. Now I play h5. So I don't want to keep this pawn on h6. I plan to push it to h4 potentially, where it would log down this pawn on g2 and also be well defended by my bishop, that is. My opponent plays g3, so he sees this plan, and now I get to actually use that plan that I was keeping a secret here, f4. So I really wanted my king on g6 to come into the game, even if it cost me a pawn. For example, if he goes pawn takes f4, here comes king f5. This is now suddenly a passed pawn that can be shoved down the board. And here, perhaps surprisingly, black is starting to generate quite some quite a bit of activity here. So white decides to just sit and wait with rook d2. Now I go king f5, and he simply plays rook to d1. And now I decide that it's time to cash in my activity, and I play the move pawn to e5. And at this point, I have a winning position. And I will attach this game, the rest of this game in this PGN. I will give you a full disclosure here. This is probably one of the best games that I've played in this variation, and a pretty good example of how to generate winning chances with black. However, amazingly, I ended up losing this game in a completely heartbreaking fashion, making a horrible blunder. But up until this point, and also the next several moves, I believe it was a model demonstration on how to handle this position here. So that is going to be our coverage for now of the of this endgame that arises here after c4, queen e4, knight e4, bishop 3, and this move f5. Again, I will include a couple more games in the bonus chapter if you would like to get more acquainted with this. But for now, you can just play f5 with confidence, and also always keep in mind this pawn on d4 is weak, and make sure that you're sort of playing with some gusto, with some slight aggressiveness, like my plan of g6 and f4 that we saw in the game here. I will come to the moment. Here, of course, g6, and then advancing these pawns up the board. This is, of course, you may not get this position in your game, but again, if you want to play this position for a win, not content with just getting a draw, try to find these imbalances, try to sort of probe, just wait around, see if your opponent makes a mistake. These are all some strategies that I've employed in order to win these endgames. And the primary piece of advice that I can give here is try to look for these small imbalances that don't necessarily harm you. Don't just be conscious of the risk you're taking. At the same time, just like when I played g6 here, I understood that I was fracturing my king side, but I also at the same time white can't really take advantage of it. So minimal risk, but keep imbalancing the position. The more imbalances there are, the better the chances of outplaying your opponent. Now we're going to conclude this quite lengthy chapter with one more variation here. Going back to this position here, we already looked at king b1, and now we have looked at knight e4, and a couple of other options. First of all, a move that has been played against me quite often, and I've really welcomed this move, and it's actually been played against me quite recently as well by a 2200 player, a master, so it can still crop up. My opponent played the move c4 here, which looks like a very natural sort of idea, gain some space, but after I castled, my opponent plays bishop c3. This is an idea that is that your opponents may play if they are not familiar with the new ideas for black in this variation, and if you've been paying attention and watching this presentation, you should already know that b5 here is a very, very effective retort here, and it's all the same ideas. We just want to get rid of this pawn. So, for example, if takes, queen takes, we can play knight d5, and then rook b8, and then, oh, this position is just absolutely a dream for black. Rook b8, queen b6, rook c8, just to give some examples of moves that could be played. Absolute beautiful game for black here. So c4 is never a worry, just castle and hit them with b5, or the immediate b5. Basically, just as long as you play b5, you're going to be doing very well. But an idea that is warranting more respect is this move queen e2. And against this move, it's important to know the precise reaction c5. Now, the idea behind queen e2 is that white just wants to get this queen, first of all, off the d file so this rook gets an x-ray in, but also this queen on e2 is targeting this e6 pawn and defending f2. And this is actually very important when white plays this move g4 as a pawn sacrifice. After knight g4, the pawn on f2 will no longer be hanging, and when white plays rook g1 to target this knight on g4, black won't be able to play f5 because e6 hangs. Now, that may be hard to imagine for now, but let's just have a look and see how this looks. Again, I advocate c5 here as a precise reaction. It's possible to castle here, but white has this idea of knight f1, which admittedly, I should say, in recent years has been neutralized. Black has found some very nice ideas here to keep the position quite safe and balanced for him. But still, it's quite aggressive. White wants to play g4 here. And I just always avoided this variation, although, like I do say, if you want to do some work on that, it's a quite reasonable option to play. c5 is my choice here, and the idea here is if white plays d takes c5, then after the simple queen c7 getting off this d file, we're ready to get castled and also just play knight takes c5, and then this potentially rook c8 to attack down this file. The knight on c5 is very well placed. It can go to even a4 and target white's king and queen side. So dc5 is queen c7 is all really that you need to know here, followed by natural development. A move that I faced quite recently that is more dangerous is rook h e1. So white is trying to get this strong sort of e-file battery here, against which I simply recommend to castle, allowing white to fill his idea. Now, in the game that I played here, white actually refrained from playing the critical knight f5. Instead, bishop to e3, which actually allowed me to use an idea that we had seen early on in this chapter. I played rook c8, just getting my rook to that open file. My opponent played knight to e5, which is pretty natural. I played knight d5, king b1, and the idea that I'm alluding to, I played knight takes e5, pawn takes e5, and now c4, which we've already seen before. And I believe this gave me a huge advantage, and I won this game quite quickly against my 2300 opponent here. There's all these scary ideas with c3 potentially, and this knight on d5 is untouchable because there's no more c4. After my opponent played c3, I simply played b5, and the attack here is very quick with b4 and queen a5 coming, and white is just not really surviving this attack, and he did not survive the attack in my game. But a more critical option, of course, is to play knight f5 here, and there are actually several options for black here. But again, this variation is has not appeared often in my practice. But again, it's something important to know because this is quite aggressive. White may be trying to sacrifice a piece on h6 in some variations. So I'm just going to keep it simple here. I think rook e8 is a decent enough solution. You can even try taking this knight here and then queen c7. It's quite a funny idea. We're trying to trap this queen here, and we do have double pawns, but we want some compensation in terms of this pawn hanging and this knight potentially going to e4. But with best play, white should be doing all right in this variation. Should be a little better for white, but could be worth a try for black. I've played this way myself. Instead, like I said, I want to just keep it simple with rook e8, and after knight takes e7, queen takes e7. Black has a fine game here. We did give up our bishop, but oh, and by the way, this is not really a worry here for black. After pawn takes, bishop takes, well, simply not enough firepower here. White does get 2 pawns for the piece and opens up our king. But for example, black can defend here. A nice idea of active defense, c takes d4, preventing white from potentially pushing this pawn to d5. Now, after, say, knight d4 looks very natural, white is plotting some sacrifices. Queen a5, a surprising double attack here. And, yeah, white really doesn't have enough gas to continue this attack. Knight e6 fails to bishop f8 with this nice little sidestep here, not accepting the knight, but just pinning the knight. And if king b1, for example, then queen h5, double attack on the queen and the bishop. Really, lots of material here for black, and a lot of defensive resources. There's bishop f8, knight h7, knight g4 in some positions. Of course, black has to be careful not to fall for any tricks as the king is open, but objectively speaking, and even practically speaking, I don't think white's attack should be working here. And this variation has never actually been tried. So, yeah, instead here, just rook e8, knight e7, queen e7. Black is ready to play rook d8 here. And then knight can go to d5 and then c5 potentially. This pawn in h5 is, again, almost always hanging. Black just needs to be careful not to take it at a bad moment where this would actually hurt his king side. But again, a position should be around balance. So, yeah, quite a lengthy chapter here. But again, it should serve you quite well. I believe that I've covered all the critical options from white here. And I've done my best to pay special attention to the variations that I faced the most here. And again, if there's 2 things to focus on here, of course we started with looking at the option here of white playing bishop to f4. But as I mentioned at the beginning, this variation is important to know, but also at the same time, not that much to remember here. As long as in this position you remember to play b5, this will be serving you quite well. And you should be very happy to see this variation with knight e4, as it's white is just losing too much time moving this knight all over the place, so black is getting quite a good game here. Instead, the critical option here is to play bishop d2, and now again the main ideas here all involve white playing knight to e4, whether it be after king b1, after which we get this crazy opposite side castling position. Bishop e3 is best move. Now we looked at both b5 and queen b5, which is the new modern idea to shut this line down for white. And we also looked at some variations of white entering the endgame here with knight e4, Again, multiple ways to do it, but you should just remember, put the queen on d5 and then try to get it exchanged. And we also looked at some other variations for white here, including, of course, this queen d3 idea where do not play queen d5. And also another tricky line where white plays queen e2 here, and we have to respond with c5, or at least I recommend we do respond with c5. Again, quite a lengthy chapter, and I'm actually going to, again, attach a bonus chapter here to show more games here. Basically, I just had a lot of material to show. This chapter ran quite longer than I actually planned it to, but hopefully all for the greater good and all for your benefit. And I really do think that studying these games and these ideas is going to give you a very, very comfortable experience playing the Caro Kann here.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.